All right, let's turn to Democratic strategist Chris Kofinas now. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
None of us are able to see the physical aspect of this and who started it and who shoved whom, and was that sort of caged-in feeling justification for shoving these guards. But just talk about how this looks from a campaign that has, in fact, gone out of its way to prohibit actual questions from actual reporters in actual kind of defined reporter candidate traditional environments.
Well, to state the obvious, it looks pretty bad. I mean, you basically create a self-fulfilling prophecy here that you've got something to hide, and it's pretty obvious that Joe Miller has got something to hide. You know, this is one of those classic examples of where the response creates a worse story than if you just answered, taken 5 minutes and answered a couple of questions from the, from this reporter. But I think this is part and parcel of Miller's campaign. I mean, when you go out there and you make a blanket statement that you will not be taking any questions about your past. I mean, he's running for the U.S. Senate. This is a 6-year term, for goodness sake. The notion that somehow neither the reporters nor the public have a right to ask you about your past is laughable on its face. But it shows you, I think, the mentality of Mr. Miller, as well as a lot of these so-called Tea Party candidates.
Do supporters of the Tea Party candidates applaud in this circumstance when the alleged liberal media is pushed around like this? Is this actually working out to play to Joe Miller's base and other Tea Partiers' base?
Maybe to some extent, but to I think moderates, Democrats, independents who are still undecided, this should chill you to the bone, because this is, I think, reflective of a lot of the Tea Party candidates in terms of how they are approaching these races. And that is, when you challenge these candidates, whether it's, Sharon Angle in Nevada, whether it's, John Racy in West Virginia or Joe Miller in Alaska, and you challenge them about their extreme positions, or Paul Rand in Kentucky, another good example, they become very defensive and almost hostile, that the notion that somehow you dare question them. Well, when you look at their positions, they are entirely out of the mainstream, and that is really, I think, the heart of the problem. That they don't want to defend their position, they don't want to talk about their positions, because when they do, they end up alienating those voters. So maybe it mobilizes some on the right, so to speak. But I also think in Alaska, when you have three candidates between Murkowski, the current incumbent, as well as Scott McAdams, the Democrat, it ends up creating a very dangerous dynamic. And I actually think this is going to create a story that's not going to end right to election day.
One correction. Somewhere somebody named Paul Rand freaked out when you mentioned him just then. Obviously you meant Rand Paul, just for the record.
Sorry, Rand Paul.
Last point is sort of, this almost coats over this other extraordinary story involving Joe Miller. At that town hall event, before all the video flip cameras came on, he said the following about border security: "We have the capacity to, as a great nation, secure the border. If East Germany could, we could." Is anybody that stupid as to not know that the Berlin Wall was designed to keep people in? It wasn't an immigration. It was basically to make East Berlin a prison camp, and he's supporting a wall like that to protect its borders. I mean, is the guy that asinine?
Well, I think that only can be topped by Sharon Angle in a room of Hispanic students saying that they look Asian.
Yeah.
I mean, this, again, I think is the real theme and narrative of this election, and why, Democrats, as well as moderates who may be, questioning whether they need to participate, need to wake up and face the reality that we have some of the most radical, extreme candidates that I've seen in my lifetime. You have Tea Party candidates all across the country talking about privatizing Social Security, abolishing the minimum wage, ending public school funding. This is an extreme radical agenda that they're pushing, and you're just seeing this extreme radical rhetoric play out in these individual races. But
the irony of all ironies, Chris, is that these guys probably sit and bow to a picture of Ronald Reagan every night, and Ronald Reagan's most lasting contribution to society, probably from a bipartisan point of view, was the speech that he gave in front of the Berlin Wall, saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," and Joe Miller's in favor of building a new one here. It's absolutely crazy.
It's really, it's frightening on a lot of levels, and the part that I think is most shocking is how much little attention nationally has been given to not these individual races, but what they all represent. The notion that these people are going to are going to shape our reality if they end up becoming U.S. senators. That is a scary statement. That should serve as a pretty strong wake-up call to every Democrat.
Democratic strategist Chris Kofinas. As always, Chris, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Keith.